welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have just an amazing guest coming right up, and that's none other than Amy Newmark. And she's here to talk to us about the latest Chicken Soup of the Soul book, The Empowered Woman. So Amy is the best-selling author, editor-in-chief, and publisher of the Chicken Soup in the Soul series since 2008. And she's published 133 books, most of them national bestsellers in the U.S. and Canada, more than doubling the number of the Chicken Soup of the Soul series in print today. She's also the author of Simply Happy, a crash course in chicken soup for the soul advice and wisdom that's filled with easy-to-implement practical tips for having a better life. So let's welcome to the show, Amy.
Oh, well, thanks for having me on. You know, I found you because I was looking at my Twitter analytics one day, and it said, Marianne is your most influential follower. And I thought, well, I need to get to know this person.
Well, you know, I'm so glad that you reached out because I've been following you for a number of years. I love your work, and I love what you've been doing with the Chicken Soup of the Soul. My goodness, every time it comes out, I'm like, ooh, what do we have here? Because there's always something, it's just filled with these great nuggets that people just want to hold on to.
You know, we are celebrating our 25th anniversary next month, and people say, how do you stay fresh and relevant after 25 years? You know, how can you still be doing this? And I think it's because we crowdsource. We get all of our stories from the public. So, of course, our books remain fresh and relevant because we're getting brand new stories for every book. And so we are reflecting back to society in our books what society is telling us they're interested in.
And what's important. And I think that's such a brilliant way to you know, get this book together. And it must be so hard when you get all these stories that come in. It's got to be so hard to pick the right ones for each book.
Yeah, it is. We get thousands of submissions for each book, sometimes as many as 6,000 submissions. And we have a whole team of editors that read the submissions. And then I usually see 500 or so semifinalists and narrow it down to the final 101 that are going to make the book. But the cool thing about what we do is that we do not go into the process with any preconceived notions. So we let the stories tell us what our sub-themes should be in a book. I remember when we were doing teen books, I was so surprised to find that the teens weren't talking more about social media and stuff like that. They were really talking about the universal themes that teens were caring about, 2,000 years ago, friends and love and working with their parents on things and all of that. So we really do let the stories tell us. It was really fun doing our most recent book, Chicken Soup for the Soul, The Empowered Woman, because we really didn't have any idea what we were going to get. And so I feel like the book really reflects back what women today care about.
Well, and so when you guys were compiling all of these stories, these fabulous stories from all around the world, did the topic, The Empowered Woman, was that something that was already kind of decided, or is that something that kind of evolved as the stories came in?
We had, years ago, one of our editors wanted to do a book called The Independent Woman, and so we had started collecting stories for that book, but that topic didn't feel quite right to me because it seemed to convey that you had to be a single woman or a divorced woman, and that I didn't want to go there, but I could see where she was heading. And then with everything going on out there in the world and the perception that women have started to give back some of the progress that they've made over the last few decades, I thought about it and I said, you know what, let's not do the independent woman. Let's do the empowered woman and help every woman out there become more empowered than she is now, because even the most self-confident, seemingly successful woman is a great big bundle of insecurities. And so that's how this came about. And so I actually put it on the schedule. I think I only decided to do it last fall. And we used a lot of the stories that had been submitted for the independent woman topic, and then we got more stories also. So I do respond very much to current events and what I think people are thinking about these days.
Well, it's easy to see that you're right on the target with, just the beat of what is happening in society and what people are just, striving to just develop more in their lives and learn. And I just love this book, The Empowered Woman. I feel like it's filled with so many great stories. I mean, and you did such a great job combining it so it wasn't how you're saying, like more of an isolated thing or single mom thing. Because who else is? I think it's Jane McBride. I'm not getting her full name, but Writing the Road to Myself. I mean, what a powerful story that was. Oh my goodness.
I loved that because she's older, and so she got married in the traditional times when a woman didn't go and live with her boyfriend, and so she went straight from her parents' house to getting married and living with her husband, and then she had 4 children. And she says in her story, it seemed that I was always defined in relation to someone else. I was somebody's daughter, somebody's wife, somebody's mother, and she started wondering who Jane was. And then she started writing, and she found her voice, and she found herself, and she got published, and she had her own identity, and it made a world of difference to her because she was back to being Jane McBride Choate, a real person, not just mommy or wife or daughter. And she said, independence and identity mean different things to different women. For me, they mean giving voice to the words that swirl through my mind and heart. So it's kind of interesting because I think for me, just the process of making this book was empowering because I had the power to make this book for all the other women out there. And it was like a gift I was giving to the other half of the, to my half of the population. This was like, girls, this is for you. This is from me to you because we all need this.
You are right about that. I've got my copy. I'm not letting go of it. I agree with you on that. Because it does really provide, you can turn to any chapter and it provides inspiration for any day.
Yeah, it really does. And a lot of people, the way they use our books is they'll read, say, one story every night for 101 days until they finish the book. Or they'll just randomly open it and see what they get. And they'll find that almost every story is relevant to them in some way, or is a story they want to share with their sister or their mother or their friend or their daughter. So it's really fun because even though there is some logic to the way the chapters are laid out, you really can just randomly open the book and derive a lot of benefit from it.
Well, let's talk about your chapter, Enough with the Flowers Already. I mean, I loved it. I can see some parallels in my life. I'm sure many women can see the same. But what I loved is that you have this extraordinary background that I don't think most people know about. I'd love for you to share your story with us.
Well, it's funny. I started out in college majoring in Portuguese. I was a big language person in high school. Like my senior year of high school, I took French, German, Latin, and English. That's all I took. So when I went to college, I continued the French, and I also took up Portuguese. And I was a Portuguese major at Harvard where there were 2 professors for the Portuguese department, and I was the only person majoring in Portuguese. So it was a great way to take a big impersonal university and make it very, very personal. So I became fluent in Portuguese. I had to go to Brazil for a semester because they didn't even have enough courses for me to fulfill the requirements of my major. And in Brazil, I discovered that I was fascinated by storytelling. I was fascinated by the way that the people there shared wisdom and culture and advice through these little crudely printed booklets that contained stories. And so I wrote my thesis about that. But while I was in Brazil, I also became fascinated by their telephone system. Because the way the telephone industry works is that when your phone company puts in the equipment that gives you your home phone service, they have to use that equipment for the next 30 years. So in America, our equipment was pretty old because we had had phone service for a long time. But I was down in Brazil. It was the late 1970s. They had the brand new phone equipment, and they already had call forwarding and call waiting and voicemail that you could get through the phone company. These things were unheard of in the U.S. because we were still, working our way through using the equipment for decades before it could be retired. So I came back from Brazil with this interest in storytelling, which really wasn't going to get me anywhere in life at that time, and this interest in telecommunications. So I ended up, after college, going and working in the telecommunications industry, became an expert on that, got headhunted to go to Wall Street, did investment advice in the telecommunications market, and then went and joined the management team of a telecommunications startup, and then became a board member for a lot of different technology and telecom companies. And then at age 50, circled all the way back to storytelling when my husband and I and a group of our friends and family members bought Chicken Soup for the Soul from its founders. And so it all makes a lot of sense to me, but it does sound crazy to other people. But if you think about it, really, when I was 20 years old, my two passions were storytelling and telecommunications, and I did telecommunications for almost 30 years and then switched back to storytelling, which is what I've been doing for the last 10 years. So that's the history before I actually tell you about my story in the book.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that, because I just found your background to be just so amazing. I'm like, oh my goodness, look at this. But yeah, I think that's with every woman. Like, we look at our backgrounds and we wear so many hats,
Sure, we do. And even if somebody was in one career her whole life, she also had her career as a wife or a dutiful daughter or a dutiful sibling or a mother. And so we all do wear a lot of hats, no matter what we do. So my story in the book is called Enough with the Flowers Already. So this happened a while ago, and so maybe things are better now, but I'm not sure if they are. But what happened was that when I was an analyst who was following the telecommunications industry and giving people investment advice, I had been very bullish on a certain stock, and it had gone up and up and up. And then I said, you know what, it's overvalued now, and their business is starting to make a downturn. And I told my clients, now you should get out of that stock. Take your profits and get out, because it's going to go down. Well, that all came true. The stock went down, and one of my clients basically saved millions of dollars by having gotten out of the stock when I told him to. And so what do I get from him to say thank you? I get flowers. Now, I was a serious Wall Street analyst, and I wanted money because that was my job. I got paid commissions. I wanted commissions. Do stock trades through me to thank me for this. I can't eat flowers, So, yes. I mean, I thought that was very nice of him, but not really the point, and I don't think he would have sent flowers to a man who had given him the exact same investment advice. So then, anyway, many years passed, and I ended up leaving my Wall Street job and going and joining the management team of that telecommunications company I referred to. And I became an integral part of that management team. There were only 4 of us who reported to the CEO of the company. And so we were constantly raising money to build this big telecommunications network. And I guess the highlight for me was when we did what's called a road show. So a road show is when you go out with an investment banker and you travel all around the country meeting with professional investors. These are the people running, Fidelity and all these big mutual funds and hedge funds and the pension funds and all the different people who are investing, billions of dollars on behalf of Americans. And so I went on this road show. We had a private plane. We were on a Gulf Stream. We were traveling all over the country meeting with investors, and we were raising $225 million. And I was at every single presentation. I was one of the 3 people in management who presented to all of these investors, and the deal was successful. We raised the $225 million. I was the only woman on the Gulf Stream. I was one of the guys on the Gulf Stream, and it was really great. It was a great achievement, and I knew that every single investor who had participated in that deal had heard about it from me. I was one of the people. So I was feeling pretty good. Like, I've come a long way, baby, right? So then we get, the deal closes, and then the investment banker sends us gifts. All the people who were on the plane who made the presentations, we got gifts. So I walk into the office, and I hear that our CEO got 6 bottles of Dom Perignon. I hear that our vice chairman got 6 bottles of Dom Perignon. I hear that our COO got 6 bottles of Dom Perignon. Well, I love champagne, so I was very excited. I walk into my office to see my bottles of Dom Perignon, and guess what's in there? Flowers. And I was so disappointed. I'm like, oh my God, like, there's no way that they would have sent flowers to a guy. The guys each got $1,000 worth of champagne, and I got a vase of flowers. It was just so demoralizing, and I didn't say anything at the time because I thought, you shouldn't be complaining about a gift. I mean, a gift is a gift, right? But it was just awful. And so I had really forgotten about it because I don't brood on things, but then when I was working on this book, I was telling that story to my pals at the office, and I said, oh, I should write that story for the book. So I did. So I hope things have gotten better for women, who are in the business community, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either, but I get what you're saying 100% because you're right. If you were a male, they would not send you flowers. You would have gotten bottles of champagne as well. And it's interesting just how, when we appreciate people, that we should take these kind of things into consideration.
Yeah, I mean, now I'm starting to get angry about it. I'm going to call up that person to say, I want my champagne. And by the way, it costs a lot more now, but too bad, send it anyway. But what can I do? It happened a long time ago, and I have to just be good-humored about it. And, I mean, there are certainly a lot of women who wrote stories in our book who had real problems at work, unlike my silly little problem where I just didn't like the gift that I received. I mean, we have women who were truly discriminated against in really important ways or were even sexually harassed. And it's funny, we decided to make this book before the Me Too movement even started. And I actually avoided anything political in the book. But the book does show that it's not just celebrities, top executives, people you hear about in the news as part of the Me Too movement, but it's happening to everybody. I mean, we have a story from a woman named April Knight. So she was a 45-year-old widow with 4 kids, and she really needed her job, and she worked at a jewelry store. It was not a high-paying job, and she describes herself as 30 pounds overweight, wearing bifocals, as matronly as ever, but her boss started harassing her and, coming on to her in the stockroom, trying to grope her and kiss her and telling her, if you'll be friendly, you'll get a promotion. And it was just appalling. And so she decided to file a lawsuit against him. So her family was embarrassed that she did this. She didn't get support from her family. Her coworkers were basically shunning her, like, well, you're ruining things for us at work. But she hired this young male attorney, and he was really gung-ho about, helping her with this. And he won her 5 years' worth of wages, plus a letter of apology and a letter of recommendation. And so I thought that was really interesting because it shows that Me Too happens at every level. I mean, she was a low-paid clerk in a store, and she took action and she stood up for her rights, which was really admirable.
And that's so tough when you look at everything she had to overcome to do that, just to say, you know what, I deserve to be respected and not treated this way.
Yeah, and she took a very big financial risk because she was the sole support for her 4 children. But she had just had enough, and I think that is really great when women just say, I've had enough, and I'm going to do whatever the right thing is, no matter what. I mean, I actually was like that when I was a Wall Street analyst, because if I found a company that was committing fraud, I would stand up and I would tell everybody and I would report them to the SEC. and I would try to stop them from committing fraud, even though I was putting myself at personal risk. But sometimes you just get angry, and you have to follow through and do what you think is right.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure in your story you talk about that you kind of went toe-to-toe with some big players, and you won.
I did. So I was the first and possibly only analyst ever sued by a New York Stock Exchange company. I discovered that this company was defrauding investors, and they were claiming that they had sold, X millions of dollars worth of equipment, but in fact, they were shipping equipment to a warehouse they had rented in New Jersey. This company was down in Texas. And then they were fooling their auditors and saying, oh yeah, we sold X millions of dollars worth of equipment, but they actually, all they did was they needed to get it out of their factory, so they just sent it to New Jersey. And I found the warehouse in New Jersey. I even had the bay number. I had everything. And I reported it to the SEC, and I also reported what I had found to their accounting firm. Do you know their accounting firm ignored it and let them go? They blessed their audit, and they didn't get caught for another year. But then when the management team the next year realized they were finally going to get caught, they couldn't cover it up anymore. Right before they all got fired, while they still had a few days that they were left in power, they filed this massive lawsuit against me. And so there I was, a part-time analyst raising two little kids, working out of my house in suburban Connecticut, and I have this New York Stock Exchange company suing me for the entire amount of that their stock had dropped in value, which was tens of millions of dollars. It was pretty scary.
Wow.
And I lived in fear for a year. And then finally I went through a discovery process with the lawyer for this company. And when I showed him what I had, he was shocked. He had never known that his client was guilty. And when I showed him what I had, and I said, look, I reported this to the SEC, but a very high-level person who had worked at the SEC got the investigation stopped. He was hired by the company, so he took money from the company and got the SEC investigation stopped. And
oh, wow.
And the auditors were paid more money to redo the audit and then blessed the numbers anyway, even though it was so obvious that the numbers were fake. But when the lawyer saw what I had, which was probably 25 single-spaced pages of notes, I had everything. I had so much damning evidence. He said, I'm dropping the case against you, and I'm going to pay all your legal fees for you. So it was a great victory, but I went through a year of, awful fear waiting for that day when they were going to drop the lawsuit against me.
It must have been so stressful, but I applaud you for the courage of standing up for what you believed in.
It was just wrong. They were absolutely defrauding investors. And it made me really, really mad when the auditing firm blessed the numbers, even though it was so obvious the numbers were wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, you have this quote in your story, and I love it. It actually made me laugh out loud when I read it. It says, it doesn't matter if you're male, female, or an iguana. Math is math.
Oh, so that came about because I was upset that one of my clients hadn't paid me properly for a great stock idea. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to start my own hedge fund. I'm not going to give stock ideas to these other investment managers who don't pay me properly or send me flowers instead of money. So I said, I'm starting my own hedge fund. So I started my own hedge fund because the way that hedge funds work is you just get to keep 20% of the profits that you make for your clients. So if you make $100,000 in profits for a client, you get to keep $20,000 of it. And that was finally an area where it didn't matter if I was male or female, or I said iguana because I was just trying to think about some animal that doesn't really think, Although I have to say, when I was running the hedge fund, I had this one guy who called me. I don't know what he was complaining about because I never had a money-losing quarter. Like, I made my clients money every single quarter without fail. But he called me up and he was like, I don't think you're really working to run the fund, because he knew I was working from my home. And he said, I think you're out at the bake sale at the school. And you know what I did?
Boy.
I sent him back all his money. I fired him. I decided that I would fire, but I decided, even though I needed, these investors because it was my livelihood, I decided that I would give myself permission to fire one client every quarter. And so I fired him. I sent him back his money. And then he started protesting, and he had some guy call me like, he really wants to get back in. I said, too bad, he's out. He said I was running a bake sale instead of running the hedge fund, so he's not allowed back. I'm not working for him anymore.
How empowering is that? And it's interesting when we make space, we get rid of people that don't appreciate us. It really makes space so we have room for the people that will appreciate us, that will show up. It's that whole energetic thing.
Oh, I talk about that all the time. I think it's something that women really need to feel empowered to do, and that is to say no. Whether it's getting rid of that toxic friend, or whether it's getting rid of that volunteer obligation that you really don't want to do, or whether it's just slimming down your calendar. But there's so much joy in having less in your life, less stuff, fewer people who really aren't adding value to you. I always say, look at your friends, and if it's a friend where you're saying, I have to go and have lunch with my friend, but I really don't like it because all she does is complain about everything. Well, wait, that person isn't adding value to your life. You actually have permission to choose who you make part of your life. So, yeah, I agree. It's really nice to get the toxic people or the negative people out of your life.
Yeah, and it's funny, when I look at that, I always go, well, if money's not an issue, what would you do? And then it just takes away that whole portion of, you're not thinking or focusing on the money, but just, how you feel and what empowers you.
We had a great story that I tell all the time. It's not in this book, but it's a great piece of advice anyway. We had this writer named J.C. Sullivan who, she had a great job in finance, but she hated her job. And so she was complaining about her job one day, and her brother said to her, what would you do if you won the lottery? And she said, well, I'd go to Italy. And he said, well, why don't you go to Italy? Because just by asking that question, what would you do if you won the lottery, it allowed her to have clarity on what she really wanted to do with her life. And so she became committed to going to Italy. She put her credit cards in the freezer, which I don't exactly understand what that means. Why does putting your credit cards in the freezer mean anything? But people do it. So she put her credit cards in the freezer. She canceled her cable. She stopped buying new clothes. She cut her expenses as much as she could. And she saved and saved and saved. And 6 months later, she had saved enough money to quit her job and go to Italy. And so I always say that is the best way to figure out what you want to do. And the funny thing is, when I was in Brazil doing all that work on storytelling, where I was going around and collecting stories from all these storytellers, when I wanted to get to know one of them, the question I asked them back then when I was 20 was, what would you do if you won the lottery? And they would get a dreamy look on their faces, and then they would tell me what they really wanted out of life. So it was so funny that I realized, oh my gosh, that's the method I used back when I was 20 to get people to access their real desires.
You're destined to do this, let me tell you.
I guess so. It's all very circular, isn't it?
It's funny when things come full circle, and and it's, gosh, I mean, there were so many great stories in this book. I mean, I'm sure, I've got a few that I really enjoyed that I made notes of to chat about with us here today, and I'm sure you have a few that just kind of, it'd be like trying to choose a favorite kid, so we're not going to ask you to do that, but, is there one that just kind of sticks with your heart?
Sure. There's one that I really like because it's about something that's very everyday, so it's not about something like filing a lawsuit or whatever. So this is the everyday part of being a woman. And one of the things that makes us feel proud of ourselves and more empowered and more self-confident is when we do something that we're afraid of. And in fact, I was reading recently, I think there was a New York Times op-ed piece about how it's been scientifically proven, actually, that doing something that you're afraid of can really go a long way towards helping to cure depression, which is incredible. But even without that, even if you're a perfectly happy person and everything is great in your life, you still feel even better about yourself when you do something that you're afraid of. And so we had a story from a woman named Jennifer Gibbons, and her story is about the fact that she found a dead rat in her backyard. And she didn't have a man to pick up the dead rat for her. And so the first thing she did when she saw the rat was what we would all do. She squealed and ran back into her house, right? That's all. Then she's standing in the house saying, okay, well, it's not just going to get up and walk away. It's a dead rat. And so she washed her hands. She grabbed some newspaper. She put on rubber gloves. And she made the sign of the cross. And then she threw the newspaper on top of the rat, shoved it into the plastic bag, picked it up, ran outside, dumped it in the trash can, ran back inside, removed her gloves, washed her hands, and she was probably squealing the whole time. I know I would be. And boy, did she feel proud of herself after she did that. And I think that's something that all women can appreciate. I mean, I go and get the vacuum if I see a dead bug because I won't even pick it up with a Kleenex. I will drag the vacuum up the stairs just to pick up the dead bug. So I guess I get that. I picked up the bug.
Hey, you know what? The bug can happen a lot of different ways. We don't have to touch it, you know?
Yeah, so that was a good one. And you know what else I really liked in our book is that we had some stories about body image. So everybody, there might be some women who don't have body image issues, but I think almost every woman is not satisfied. You know, you compliment your friend who looks gorgeous like a model, and she'll still say, oh, well, I have this pouchy thing in my stomach, or whatever. Everybody has something they want to complain about, and everybody thinks they need to lose weight or gain weight or make one part bigger and another part smaller. And so we had a story from this woman named Tanya Beery, who was a very fit woman, but, you know, a size 16, she felt that she was overweight, that she had jiggly parts, etc. She was actually a certified Zumba instructor, but she wouldn't even take a Zumba class at the gym, and she kept joining gyms and then being ashamed to be seen in her exercise clothing, and so she would quit the gym, and then she'd join another one, and the same thing would happen again. And finally she said, this is ridiculous, and she forced herself to go and take a Zumba class, and she loved it. And not only did she become a regular, but it helped cure another barrier to happiness, which she had, was that she had not been making new friends, and she made 4 really good friends in the Zumba class. And then when the instructor quit, she stepped in with her certification, and she became the instructor for the class. And I thought, what a great message for all of us, because there are so many of us who are afraid to be seen in a bathing suit, so we won't go to that pool party, or we'll sit on the sidelines, and we won't play volleyball, or whatever it is. We deny ourselves fun activities because we're afraid to be seen in a bathing suit or in the exercise gear, or we don't think we'll fit in the little black dress to go to that particular function, so we say no.
Yeah, a lot of us sit on the sidelines for that kind of thing. It's interesting. I have a friend, she's built like a toothpick, you know, and I don't even know how she eats like a horse, and, you know, doesn't carry any, it just goes, she works it all off, or I don't know what she does. But she gets the same thing going, gosh, you know, I've got this little pooch here, so I've got to, you know, work out more, or change, you know, I moved from a size 2 to a size 4. And so you look at this, and I guess everyone has that kind of angst, something going on with our bodies, you know.
Women are hard on themselves. I mean, I see that in business, too. I look at guys, and guys always think they know what to do, right? Like, I don't know about you, but, like, I know if I'm complaining about something on my computer and my husband says, oh, let me look at it, I'm thinking, you don't know anything. I'm better on the computer than you are, but guys just assume they know what to do, and that self-confidence actually really helps them. I mean, it helps them to do better in life because they just say, I can do that. So, yeah, women really are very self-effacing, and we somehow have to get over that and stop hiding ourselves, stop downplaying our abilities, because we're really extremely capable. And hopefully this book will help women to feel more willing to, let their light shine.
Oh, without a doubt. It reminds me of Sherry Zeck wrote a story, Do It Afraid. And I love how in her story she talks about how her husband encouraged her to follow her dreams. And it's like, do whatever you want. Do what makes you happy and what you feel passionate about. And I just love that. I think that's a good message for all women.
Yeah, doing it afraid is really, really important. And we had a lot of women who wrote stories about, picking up the dead rat or changing the light bulb they didn't think they knew how to change, or doing something scary like jumping out of an airplane. But, sometimes it's something really small. So we had one story from Wendy Rich, and her eyes were open when she was meeting her friend at a restaurant, and it was super cold outside, but Wendy got to the restaurant, and her friend was waiting outside on the sidewalk, and Wendy said, why aren't you inside? It's freezing. And her friend said, oh, I can't go into a restaurant alone. Now, that doesn't happen to be one of the things that bothers me, but I guess there are a lot of women who won't even walk into a restaurant alone. And then Wendy started thinking about herself and wondering, well, how many things was she afraid to do alone? She actually wrote a list of things that she wanted to do that she was going to need to do alone because she didn't have, like, a guy in her life at that time. And she made the list, but then she failed to do anything about it. And then she was volunteering at a senior center, and she got to talking to this guy who was wheelchair-bound, and she told him about her bucket list, and he said, do it. And one of her items was that she wanted to go to Japan alone because Japan had always fascinated her. And he said, look, I'm stuck in this wheelchair. I'm not going anywhere. Do it for me. Go to Japan alone. Have a great time. And so that was like an awakening for her, and she did it. She went to Japan, and she spent an entire month there alone, and she had such a great time, and she said that she found herself to be very good company. But I thought that was so terrific, and often when we do something that we're afraid of, once we've done it, we say, well, if I can do that, then I'll go try this thing. And then you do the next thing. You say, well, if I can do that, I can do this thing. And all of a sudden you start knocking down all of those barriers to your happiness.
And don't we need more of that, because we all come across stuff like that. But I love how she just is like, I'm going to go do this by myself and have that, just the self-discovery, the adventure, and just getting out there and having a good time and finding that she can enjoy her own company. That's a big thing.
Yeah, it really is. I think that when you have 101 stories in a book, it means that there's going to be probably at least 10 stories that really, really are relatable to a reader. And I believe that when people read this book, Chicken Soup for the Soul, The Empowered Woman, they're going to come away with fresh resolve to go out and do that thing they're afraid of, or put the bathing suit on and participate at the next social gathering, or go and start that new business, or preserve their calendar for stuff they're really interested in. But they're going to feel confident and courageous and more committed to being the best version of themselves.
Oh, yeah, the Chicken Soup for the Soul, The Empowered Woman is definitely, I love my book, and I'm not giving it up for anybody. Everyone has to go and get their own copy. I think we have enough time to kind of just touch on another one. You kind of talked about, like, clearing the calendar or what have you, but there's a whole chapter in there about time for me, and I love that, because a lot of times, especially, we've kind of touched on this a few times, that women, we're so busy, we wear so many hats regardless what we're doing, that we are at the end of our to-do list of, taking time out and just being able to relax. In that group of stories, in those chapters, what's one that you'd like to share with us?
Well, there was one about skydiving. So this woman, Linda Barbosa, she never did anything scary, but her husband liked to do things scary. And then one day she went with him because he was going skydiving, and she said, "I'm going with you." And he couldn't believe it. And she did it. And I think it was partly because she didn't give herself time to think. She just made an instant decision, and, a few minutes later, she's being trained to jump out of the airplane, and then she's doing it within the next hour or two. And so she didn't have time to think about it, to become afraid, to back out of it. And I think that's actually really good advice. When there's something that you're afraid of, just do it. Just say you're going to do it and then do it right then. And I always have a policy of just say yes. So I have a policy of saying yes to new things before I can really think about it, as long as it's not something insane. And so I think that's what she did, and that has always worked for me as well. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention about the book, which I forgot to mention, is that royalties from this book are being donated to Dress for Success.
Oh, that's right. That's right. And then for our listeners that might be new to Dress for Success, what is that?
So Dress for Success is this amazing organization that's been around for decades, and they saw a need to empower women by helping them put together the clothing that they needed to go to a job interview. And so this is not a nonprofit that just gives money out. This is a nonprofit that helps women get the right outfit for the interview, get some clothing they need for these jobs they're going after, gives them some training for the interview, some career advice, and therefore empowers these women to get that job, support their families, become independent. And so it's a wonderful organization. It is all over the U.S. and Canada, and actually has chapters all over the world. And so it was our absolute first choice. We wanted to support a nonprofit with the Empowered Woman book, and our very first choice was Dress for Success, and they said yes, and their amazing CEO, Joy Gordon, wrote a foreword for the book, and so we're really excited about her foreword, in which she shares some success stories from women who became empowered through the Dress for Success organization. And we're so excited about raising money for them because it's such a good cause.
Oh, my goodness. It really is. I mean, I can think of a lot of times when I was in my 20s. It's like if you didn't go to a job interview wearing what you felt was kind of like the right clothing, it could impact how you felt through the entire process.
Oh, definitely. And I know when I'm interviewing people, I look at what they're wearing, and I don't expect them to dress that way every day. But we're business casual around here at Chicken Soup for the Soul, but I do expect them to come in for their interview more dressed up than we ever actually are at work, because it shows professionalism, it shows respect for the opportunity, etc.
All of that, I agree. I mean, I used to have 100 people that report to me across the U.S. and would hire people too, and being on both sides of that, being younger and having interviewed for places, and then also being the person that's doing the interviewing, it is a big deal, and those are things that people check off their list, even if it's a mental check off.
Yes, that is true, definitely.
That is so cool. Well, so I know the book was just released, so how exciting is that? Where can our listeners pick up their own copy of Chicken Soup for the Soul, The Empowered Woman?
They can pick it up at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, their independent bookstore. They can find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble online. They can find it at Walmart. And if you have listeners in Canada, they can pick it up at Walmart in Canada, at Costco in Canada. It will be in a lot of drugstores. It will be all over the place. It's a really great topic. So, and if the store is out of it, then just order it online.
And for our international listeners, I'm sure that this book is probably available on Kindle too, right?
Yes, it will be. It is available as a Kindle book, as an Apple iBook, as a Barnes & Noble Nook book. And we do a very nice thing with our ebooks. We have our books are very pretty inside, and we have figured out how to carry that over into the ebook. So it's not just pages and pages of text. You still see our pretty graphics. What we did in this book was we pulled out particularly important phrases from the stories, like when you're reading a magazine and there's something called a pull quote. We did the same thing inside the pages of this book. For example, that story about the woman who became the Zumba instructor, like the pull quote on her story says, "I'd never seen in the flesh an instructor who was a size 16. So we pull out important phrases from their stories. So it's a very nice reading experience, even as an ebook.
Gotta love that. Well, I love my book, and I highly suggest everyone pick up their own copy of Chicken Soup for the Soul, The Empowered Woman. And Amy, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today and share all this great information, of course, this fabulous book.
Well, thank you. And if any of your listeners would like to submit a story to Chicken Soup for the Soul, it's a very easy and fun process. You go to our website, chickensoup.com, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll see where you can click on Submit Your Story. And then you go, and we have writing guidelines. We have a description of all the books we're collecting stories for, and then we have a little form that you fill out and where you copy and paste your story into it. And we read every single submission. So even if you've never been published before or you need a little help, I will personally edit your story for you, but go ahead and submit. And a lot of women report that writing and finding their voice is one of their paths to empowerment.
Well, that's such a gift that you guys will do that portion of the editing to kind of help bring that all together. And I know at chickensoup.com you also have where they can look at the other books. I love your podcast. I always love listening to that. So they've got that available as well. And you've got other just great resources there.
Yeah, we do. And we've started posting book trailers also. And so you'll find trailers for all of our books that have come out this spring. Well, you'll see a trailer for My Amazing Mom where I tell 3 stories from the book, and there's a trailer for My Crazy Family where I tell 3 stories from the book, and then there's the trailer for The Empowered Woman where I tell 3 stories from the book. But we're having a lot of fun trying to use technology now and reach our readers in different fun ways, which is why we have book trailers and videos and why we have the podcast, which I work very hard on. So thank you so much for listening to the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast.
Oh my goodness! It's part of what my routine is. I love seeing the new podcasts when they come out. I love listening to them. I find them so empowering. It's a nice way to kind of start your day as well. And of course, I'm following you guys on social media, which I highly suggest everyone do the same. So, thank you so much, Amy. Oh my goodness, this has been so much fun. We're going to have to do this again soon.
Well, thank you very much, Marianne. I really enjoyed it so much.
Well, thank you, Amy. It's been such a pleasure to spend this time with you. I know you have another book coming out, and we're going to get you on the calendar to have you come back and talk about it. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.